Now, farmers knew exactly when to prepare the fields and when to plant because they knew when the rains are coming. But now it's no longer possible to know that.
Hi, my name is Julia Wallbowering, and I am the team lead of international programs here at CBM. Today, I'm joined by my colleague Palisi Kuvava, and Palisi is the Relief and Development Specialist for CBM in Africa. Today, we are talking about food programming. That is programming that helps people feed their families and access the food and the nutrition that they need. So, over the past 50 years, we've actually seen worldwide a decline in hunger, which is something to celebrate. However, in different regions, depending on the situation and the context, hunger still remains an issue for many people, accessing enough food to feed their families or the adequate nutrition that they need to thrive. We are going to talk a little bit about some of the reasons for that and the ways that our partners are responding. So, Palisi, first of all, hello and welcome.
Hello?
Palisi, hello. You are calling us today from Goma in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is where you live and also where you work for CBM with our partners. And Goma, we have been praying for you and for our partners because Goma has been under attack recently by the M23 rebel group, which has caused an extremely stressful situation in the city. People sheltering in their homes, as well as thousands, hundreds of thousands of displaced people from other parts of the country coming in as camps are disassembled or just people are fleeing situations of conflict. So, Palisi, before we begin, I want to ask, how are you doing? How is your family? And how are our partners doing right now?
Thank you, Julia. I'm grateful. My family and I are doing well. And yeah, my wife works in a hospital and she's able to go to work now, although there is a lot of work because of the wounded people.
Mhm.
But also our partners, the CBCA and the CEBCE, are doing well. This morning, I have been at the office of the CBCA. They resumed working last Monday. So uh, we are fine.
Good. Well, we're glad to hear that. And our prayers continue to be with all of you in a situation which I can imagine is extremely stressful day to day. Now, Palisi, we have just put together, you and I have been working on this along with our teams, a relief initiative to respond to the crisis in Goma, which will help feed up to, I think it's about 200 households in the coming weeks. Can you tell us a little bit more about how the conflict has impacted people's ability to get food in the city, and then how our partners are responding to that?
Well, when the war started 2 years ago, people started moving from the war affected areas to the city. And as the rebels were capturing villages, more and more people were flooding in. And they were almost reaching 1 million people when suddenly Goma was also captured and the camps have been dismantled. So they are asked to go back to their places. But this is causing a challenge. Some of them have been able to go back home on foot, those who didn't come from far away, but others are not able to go for many reasons. There were people who came from far away. They spent days on the way, on the road because they kept moving as the war was approaching. So going back home is a challenge on foot. Others had their houses destroyed before they flee, so they don't know where to go. There are also the patients, the wounded, who are in hospitals, and let's say pregnant women, and this kind of people. They don't know how to go back home. They cannot go. And there are also even land conflicts at home. So some people are afraid even to go back to their own homes. So when the camps were dismantled, some just dispersed in the city if they have a family which accept to host them, but many others went to schools and church buildings. And you see now the challenge is bigger because they have no more access to international organizations for relief. They have nothing to live on. Now, what the churches are doing is trying to provide food to those who are in church buildings and to assist those who cannot feed themselves, but also those who are in hospitals, because if they can have medicine, even if they can be treated, but they need also to eat. But it is a challenge because even the local people are also affected. You know, the city was looted just when the war broke out, and some people who were doing small business had their shops looted. So that is what the church is trying to do, to see how to assist those people who cannot yet go back home, but also maybe to assist even those who want to go back home. If they have to travel for 2 days, they need food. So there are many situations where the church is facing the challenge of IDP.
Wow. And when you say IDP, internally displaced people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's amazing. Our partners are, it seems to me, so well situated because they have these churches, but also are involved in the hospitals and leadership and administration there. And so they have a way to provide food to these people who are displaced, who don't have a home in the city right now.
Yeah, and the church is a good setting to identify people because, as I said, some are scattered in the city, and it is easier to identify them when the announcement, or when they try to find information from the church, from people who come to the church.
It's amazing, and we're so grateful for our partners and their ability to respond because they themselves have been so impacted by this. They are living in the midst of it as well, and yet they are reaching out and local churches are responding. Now, Palisi, when we talk about food programming, there are a couple terms we often throw around. We talk about food assistance sometimes, and then sometimes we talk about programming that improves food security. Can you tell us a little bit about the difference between those two, and then how our partners decide which kind of food programming to do?
Food assistance is in the case of urgent and sudden humanitarian situation when a crisis erupts, such as war. You have also natural calamities such as drought or flood or volcanic eruption, and people are suddenly removed and have nothing to rely on. They need food on the spot. And this is what we are trying to do with the internally displaced people. It can be at the moment when they are here, but also we have to see when they go back home how they are going to survive, because, as I said, some of them have no more houses. So it includes also rehabilitation. Food security is meant for a long-term livelihood improvement. You know, the word food security, there are some criteria to say that people are food secure. Food has to be available, that means it can be found. It has to be accessible, if they have the possibility to get it. It has to be utilized, because some may have food, but because of some conditions, they cannot take it. But it has also to be sustainable, stable, not just occasional. Food assistance is occasional, but food security has to serve a long time to improve livelihood. That means everybody, and this must not be a category of people. It means everybody has access to food, can afford it, can use it for a long time.
Thanks, Palisi. That's really helpful. And at CBM, we support our partners programming in both areas. Sometimes we do food assistance, like in this situation where food is needed immediately. But most of our ongoing programming with partners is actually addressing food security. So this root cause, long-term access, stability to food and nutrition. One of the things that I think about a lot, Palisi, is in situations of chronic conflict or chronic crisis, where crisis seems to pile upon crisis and keep going. Is it possible, from your perspective, to improve food security in a situation like that? How do our partners address that kind of context?
To tell the truth, in the context of camps, we cannot assure food security, but it is possible to contribute to improve the livelihood. And that is what we have been doing in the last joint program between CBCA and CEBCE. That
Yes.
means identifying some people who are active in the camp,
Yeah.
ask them what they can do, what they are interested in, then provide them with some training and equipping them so that they can start that activity.
Mhm.
In the first experience, the first experimentation, I would say,
Yeah.
we trained some men and women in bakery.
Yes.
So they are making fritters. They bake. After training them, we gave them some flour and some equipment to be able to prepare the cakes and sell
Mhm.
them in the camps and even out of the camp. This gives them some income, even if it is not too much, but some income on which they can rely. But the second advantage is that whenever they have to go back home, we hope that they will be able to continue to use that skill to improve their livelihood. So that is the kind of activity we can do in the camp. It is possible also to try gardening or other skills. Young people, for instance, are interested when you try to interest them to transport services. It has to be with them because if it must not be something from us. We have to work on it with them, on
Right.
what they like and what they feel able to do to improve their livelihood.
That makes a lot of sense. One of the things I really liked about this initiative with Civica and CEBCE, training people to bake and essentially start small businesses within the IDP camps, is that it it improved the long-term well-being of the individuals who received training, but it was also still providing food to people within the camps as well. So there was this double approach to improving food security in a situation which is really unstable and changing so much. So I thought that was so creative. Now, Polici, a lot of our food security programming involves an education component. Wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about the kinds of education that our partners are doing as they do food security programming, and what is it that farmers want to learn about in these contexts, in the context where our partners are working, and how is it helping them?
Our food security program is based on the principles of conservation agriculture. Maybe the background is that we have in some places forests and vast area. Now, traditionally, people cut the trees, burn them, use traditional methods, and maybe they can harvest in 1 or 2 years, but after that, they have destroyed the soil and they cannot harvest anymore. So they have to go deeper in the forest, leaving the children behind. So it involves a lot of risks. So what we try to do is they can restore that soil, which they have been using, and make it as productive as it was at the beginning. So we train them in the three principles of conservation agriculture, which is minimum soil disturbance. That means they don't have to dig deep because by doing so, they disturb the soil and it cannot work properly. Second is permanent soil coverage so that the sun doesn't hit the roots of the plants, but also water can stay after rain. Even if the sun shines, the soil remains with water for the roots. And the third one is crop rotation or intercropping, so that they may be able to, some crops when they have been planted many times, the soil gets somehow tired and affected. So we train them on how they can replace crops depending on the type of crops, but also which crops can go together for the best use of the soil. So these are the three principles on which all the program is based. Farmers are really happy to learn. At the beginning, it looks like heavy work, having to carry mulch and take it to the field.
Yeah.
But when they see the harvest, then they are very happy about it. That's why We want to get their own opinion, their choice. At the beginning, we can ask them to start with a small portion of their field, which will not make them tired. And the rest, they continue as usual. After 1 year, when they see the harvest, they decide on their own to apply the technologies to the whole field. And it has really been successful.
That makes sense, because I was going to ask you, I know even for myself, when I'm used to doing something a certain way, it can be hard to change that or to want to feel motivated to do that change. So that's brilliant, because if you see the results, it makes sense that you'd want to adopt those practices. One of the things we sometimes talk about when in connection with food security is climate change. And I'm curious, are you seeing the impact of climate change on farming in the DRC? And how are our partners and how are farmers responding to those changes?
We are seeing it.
Yeah.
You know, at the beginning, the theories, science were difficult to convince the people when we speak about carbon or whatever. Farmers who have not been at school don't understand that. But there are practical things that we see, such as the change of seasons. You know, we have two main seasons in Africa in general, in equatorial Africa, where they plant. Some crops we plant at the beginning and by September. Now, farmers knew exactly when to prepare the fields and when to plant because they knew when the rains are coming. But now it's no longer possible to know that.
Yeah.
Sometimes they used to plant maize on the 15th of September, so they prepared the field before. Sometimes they plant at the beginning of September, and then there are no rains until October, and then the crops dry on the field. Or suddenly rains come before they have started preparing the field, and then they cannot benefit properly. So this helps them to understand that things have changed, and that is what, when you can tell them, that is what we call climate change. So they understand easily.
Yeah.
So what we are trying to do about it is exactly conservation agriculture.
Okay.
Because with conservation agriculture, when you know how to keep the soil, to protect the soil, then you can plant, you can keep your crops even during the dry season, and you will be able to harvest even out of season. So we try to select also crop, let's say drought resistant crops, to educate them on which crops to plant when. So this helps to select the appropriate crops and not be affected by the climate change.
I certainly have heard stories coming out of these projects and programs from farmers that talk about increased yields, or just that increased resilience when rainfall is unpredictable and not following the same pattern that it did for years and years and years. And Palisi, you recently brought together a number of members of our partners from all over Africa, brought them together for some training. And one of the things that you focused on was building kitchen gardens, which is, I think, something a lot of Canadians can relate to. Many of us have gardens in our backyards that we, access, go out from our kitchens to access. Can you tell us a little bit more about why kitchen gardens are so important and what difference they make?
Very often, our farms are far from the home. So for the daily life, it's not always, there are days when you cannot reach the farm. So we try to use the space at home to create small gardens, even vertical gardens, because the space is limited. And that, even if it is raining the whole day, it is possible to access the crops which are on that kitchen garden. It is near the kitchen. The second thing is that you can use, let's say, the waste from the kitchen as manure, as fertilizer for that kitchen, and then it can produce more. And the third advantage is that it helps to diversify nutrition. In the farm, sometimes you have only maize, and the family relies on that. So because of that, they eat maize every day. Now, with the kitchen garden, we try to put different layers where they can cultivate different types of vegetables and so on. So this helps to diversify the diet. So that is the advantage. And we always combine it with small animals
Oh, like which
eating,
small animals?
yes, such as chicken,
Chickens?
rabbits, guinea pigs, because they help also to contribute to nutrition. First of all, they provide the manure that will fertilize the garden,
Right.
but also they make it easy in the family. You know, if a family has a goat or a cow, it's not possible to slaughter it. But
Uh,
when there are rabbits at home or guinea pigs, the mother doesn't need the permission of the father to slaughter one for the children. So they have easy access to meat
right.
and proteins. So this helps that's when all of these contribute to food security.
One of the things I loved seeing when I visited our partner in Kenya was that they were teaching kids at the schools how to do these kitchen gardens. And it was actually the kids and the youth that were bringing the concept home and saying, we want to do this, and teaching their parents how to do the kitchen garden. And I think that's such a wonderful way to bring different generations in and equip a generation for improving the nutrition in their households and
That's
the
not really strategic because of some cultural, it helps even to break some cultures to access to the consumption of some food. I can give even my own example. At home, there were some eggplants which we didn't consume at all,
oh,
but it took us to learn them from school and started eating them, then telling my mother I wanted to eat them, and my mother started cooking them. So it has become now part of our diet. But in
amazing.
our culture, we didn't have them.
Right. So it's a way of trying new things that doesn't take a lot of energy or input. But oh my goodness, yeah, if your child wants to eat a new vegetable, there's great motivation to grow and cook that new vegetable. That's wonderful. Halisi, it's hard to talk about food security, access to food without talking about money as well. And so I know one of the components of many of our food security programs is starting up something called Village Savings and Loans Societies, VSLAs, we call them. What are these and how do they help improve food security?
It serves maybe two or three main purposes. One thing is the concept of saving. You know, in some places they cannot have access to the bank, and because of this, they don't have this notion of saving. So we try to tell people that you don't save because you are full. You save because you want to be full tomorrow. So that is the first thing. Because people used to think, I don't have much money. Why should I save?
Right.
So that is the first idea to inculcate the minds of people. Now, the second thing, as I said, there are no banks everywhere. So when they need seeds, because the project is not going to provide seeds, when they need inputs or other needs, they want to get access to money, or when they want to buy new fields. So the Village Saving and Loan Association is a system where we put people together, a maximum of 30 people who are doing maybe similar things, who have low income, and they start saving together every week, meeting. But during the meeting, they come also together. It contributes to their cohesion. And then after 1 month or two, they can get loans from that budget and do small business or buy crops or buy a new field. And they give back with a small profit. And at the end of the year, they will share their capital and profit and be able to achieve one thing. So that's why at the beginning, we teach them even to make long plan term, saying, what do you think you can do after 1 year of saving? So the person saves with that intention that when I get my shares, I will buy a goat or I will buy a bicycle. So these are the things which are helping the people in the rural area, especially. So that's why we call it Village Saving and Loan Association, which gives access to funds even to people who don't have bank accounts.
It's really neat to see that. And I think one of the main components of sustainability in some of these programs, because our partners will come in for a set amount of time in a community, but the goal is not to stay there forever, providing, inputs and help. We want to improve security so that people actually build this resilience in their communities on their own. And the VSLAs seem to be a really successful way of building that capacity to save for seeds and inputs and school fees and the things that people need to improve their access to food,
Exactly.
overall well-being.
One
Yeah.
specific economic aspect when they get improving is that sometimes when there are a lot of crops, the prices go low because
Ah,
people come to buy them at a low price. Now, when they have nothing to pay the school fees, they will have to sell at any price. But
right.
when there is a VSLA,
Yeah.
then instead of selling the crops when they are low, they can keep them,
Ah.
get money from the VSLA, pay the fees, and when the prices get high again, they sell the crops and pay back the loan.
So it actually changes the incentives for farmers for selling and holding. That's
Exactly.
really neat. I hadn't heard that aspect before, but it makes a lot of sense. Halisi, what is the connection between food security and the good news of the gospel? We talk a lot at CBM about integral mission, about sharing the good news through both word and scripture, but also through action. How does this relate to food programming from your perspective?
I feel it to be like two faces of the same coin. I always tell my pastors, don't take hungry people to heaven. We need to
Mm,
feed them. Jesus knew that they need not only to hear the word, but also to get food.
mm,
So it's part of the gospel. But on the other hand, farming is also God's activity, God's mission. Because when you read Genesis, there is complementariness. That means with interdependence.
yeah.
God said, "You will the soil will give you food, but you have to protect, let's say, to cultivate the soil to protect it." So we are partners with the soil. So if one of us doesn't do his or let's say his task properly, the other one will suffer.
Mm,
If we don't protect the soil, then the soil will not give us food.
mm,
So we try to show in the framework of integral mission that farmers are doing also God's mission as long as they do it for the glory of God.
that's wonderful. I love that. We are partners with the soil. Polisi, as you continue to live and work in the context where you are working, and you see our partners responding to hunger, what gives you hope?
As I mentioned in the previous question, I think it is first of all faith. We know that God has a plan for us, even in the hard situations. He says, I have a good plan for you. And we believe in that when we have faith. So we are not desperate. We know that any situation we are going through, according to Psalm 23, we are just going through the valley of the shadow of death. We are not destroyed. But there is also the aspect of love. One of the most important pleasure I see in my work is when I go to the farm and I meet the farmers and they show me what they were able to do after the training, thanks to what we have given them. Very often, I'm very far. They want to give me pineapples to carry, chicken, eggs. They make even bracelets of eggs and crown me with them. And that is my happiest moment. It gives me more courage to go forward. But on the other hand, it's because I know it is not easy, there is also the support and prayers from the partners. When we get support from CBM to do the work, we want our partners to know that what they are giving is reaching the people and it's doing God's work on the field. But we get also strength when we know that elsewhere there are people who are praying for us. So this helps us to go forward without fear.
Well, Palisi, we are so grateful for your work in Goma and around Africa with our partners there. Be assured of our prayers, especially right now, and our prayers for our partners as well as they carry out this work that God is calling them to, that God has gone ahead of them to prepare. We're praying for them. We're grateful for the things that they are doing. So thank you for sharing a little bit more with us, with our Canadian partners who are watching, to let us know a little bit more about food programming, how it works, and to share what's bringing you hope right now. So thank you, Palisi. Grateful for you, and grateful for all of you who are watching as well. Thank you for taking the time to learn a bit more, and we appreciate and covet your prayers.